and thank you for joining us. We're gonna start audio one more time. Is that right?
There you go. You're on.
All right, I'm gonna do that introduction one more time. Welcome to Kansas Community College. Thank you for joining us. It's a beautiful Wednesday night. Hopping back on this horse after last night. I was just telling Katarina, my guest this evening, we might have published 2 or 3 bread recipes, which completely threw the 900 people watching off for. So I know your husband is a baker. If he was watching, I apologize profusely, but we're doing it. And tonight is all about art. It's all about sort of the pillars of the Seattle art scene. And I am joined by Catharina Manchanda from the Seattle Art Museum. She is a curator there. In fact, she's the John and Mary Shirley Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art. Is that, did I say that properly?
You've got everything.
You said
fantastic.
John and Mary Shirley actually might be out the window. I don't know if they're watching tonight, but I want to make sure if you're listening, I hope I did that properly. Katarina, welcome to Kansas Community College. It is so cool to have you here. I'm so excited to sort of spend this hour with you. And
it is such a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. And again, we live in this crazy time. I wish we could be all together in the restaurant, but this is as good as it gets.
This is it. I wish I could pour you a cocktail. So we've been doing these sort of casual conversations and cocktails. I have one here. I don't know if you can see it. And you have yours. Looks. I gotta be honest. Yours looks more like coffee. It's totally cool, actually.
I'll get mine later.
Yeah,
I'll get mine
all right,
later.
Excellent. So we got a chance to talk yesterday through some of this, but I just want to, for those that are kind of tuning in for the first time, a little bit the premise of this was that, we have no business, and I know absolutely or next to nothing about art. And yet when we thought, what do we do around here to kind of keep the lights on in the city and maybe put out an encouraging word, we thought, what a great opportunity to head back to school and to take a moment to slow down and to pause and just to study our own town. And as I've been reflecting through these classes, I am falling in love with the city that I thought I knew really well. And as it turns out, I really don't. And so it's been amazing. Even though I wouldn't wish a pandemic on anyone, it's been amazing even just to have the space to kind of take a moment and say, who are the people who kind of built this city and made it what it is? And maybe they've already been through hardships like we're going through, and what are the character traits that we could learn from them? And you have brought 2 of them to the forefront and introduced me to 2 of them. I have been loving researching them online. Oh my gosh. Jenny Wright and Barbara Earl Thomas. Barbara's website is stunningly beautiful. Go there and just stare at it and encourage yourself. But before we go there, before we kind of head to that direction, can we just get a couple of things straight about what it means to be a curator of modern and contemporary art? Can you take us into your world a little bit? What do you do for a living?
Oh, I love that question. Yes, actually, you are in my world because you're in my office, which is always, when I'm not around art, I'm around books and papers. So everything is always overflowing with materials here. They seem to.
I was wondering if one of the things in the background is like the next cool exhibit. Is this a sneak peek at some great piece of art there?
Maybe. I mean, there's always, I can't turn around my PC, but in front of me is like the wall of inspiration, all the different things I think about all the time.
Yeah.
Behind me is a poster from a show we did a couple of years ago. But yes, it's always a mix of different things. But in terms of what does a curator do? I mean, you study art, you study art history, and for those who are like totally new to this whole thing, there are 2 types of, well, maybe 3 types of curators. I mean, there are the curators who only organize biennales. If you ever heard of like the Venice Biennale, these kind of big art shows, those are like big events, right? Where a curator or a curatorial team get together and think about what is big, new, important in the world right now. If you work at an institution, if you work as a curator at a museum that is collecting art, your role is much more, I think a lot of people think of curators only through exhibitions. So that's one of the things that we do. It's a really fun part. But
Sure.
these days, you know, you hear about people curating coffee bean collections and wines, I'm sure, as you're aware. But curator means somebody who takes care of art in the original definition. And in terms of working at a museum, you both look at, well, what is important right now? What are the kind of shows we want to do? That becomes a conversation with many colleagues around the museum. And at the same time, you, of course, also look at building the collection. So the fun part, which is something we might go less into this evening, but maybe for another day, is thinking about, well, what are really important things that we should be collecting, and how should we be building our collection? So those are kind of two.
And that's sort of what
yeah.
that's kind of what I think about when I think about what you're doing. I know people always assume that I just sit around and taste food and wine, and that's the restaurant business. And I imagine that you just sit around, you know, staring at beautiful art, at the sort of the ultimate arbiter of what is cool in the art world. It's just sort of like yes, no, but maybe that's not how it happens. That they don't just like scroll in front of you, you know. But you do get to do this in some sense. Like you are kind of living the dream gig of the person who is helping to define not just Northwest art in the sense of what we are collecting and safeguarding here, you know, in the Seattle Art Museum and the Sculpture Park and the other ones, but like you're also working with the artists to sort of help bring this art to life, right? And as we were talking, the museum has this really cool mission statement. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like for those that may not, like myself, may just be like complete cretins, like the layman of art, like what is the point of the museum and why is it crushes it? What?
And do they restore art? People are curious.
Oh, and some people are even asking on the chat. My brother Brian is monitoring the chat right now. And do you restore art? Is that a part of it? Like, are you in that?
They don't let me anywhere near touching the art. That's not what a curator is allowed to do. That's what a conservator does. They have, you know, incredibly specialized training. They get to learn how to mix oils and, I mean, huge specializations. I mean, one person deals only with objects, for instance, restoring them. Somebody else only with painting. Somebody else only with works on paper. So I wish I had that skill set, but unfortunately, no. They don't even want me to hang anything on the wall because it would probably be falling off if I did it. So no, I'm not handling the art.
Okay, but you do get to sort of look at it and say, okay, this is for us, like this is for the Seattle Art Museum, or that maybe not so much, right? Is that that's an important piece of what you're, and how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of cuts to. You know, starts to go in the direction here of the talk this evening. So as a curator of contemporary art who works at a general museum such as the Seattle Art Museum, and the museum's mission is connecting art to life. So, you know, the museum started with a big collection of Asian art in what is today the Seattle Asian Art Museum up on Capitol Hill. Mm-hmm. Then we have the big building downtown. That's where I'm sitting right now. And the museum also has the Olympic Sculpture Park, which is a 15-minute walk from here on the waterfront. So all three sites are the Seattle Art Museum. But it's kind of helpful to remember that the museum started out in 1933 as a museum of Asian art, and all these other departments and collections subsequently were added onto
that platform,
that original focus. And just going back one more time to this idea of, you know, curating contemporary art. So one of the things that I love about being a curator of contemporary art, let's say compared to somebody with a specialization in Renaissance art or in African art of earlier periods, is I get to work with living artists. I get to have conversations with artists. I get to sometimes, as in the case with Barbara Earl Thomas, I get to see the work as it's being made, right? Yeah. So visiting in the studio, seeing how things take shape. And that's different than, say, saying, gosh, I dreamt up this fantastic exhibition. Sure. Here are the works that I want to borrow, but they're all already completed. And so you know what you're inviting into your exhibition. It's a known, so to speak. But working with contemporary artists is a huge amount of fun, and of course there are always surprises too.
Are you kind of freaking out a little bit? I mean, it seems like when like an art curator, you guys are so put together, and the museum is so professionally and beautiful, but like when you finally get to work with an artist and you're there either collaborating or talking, there's got to be a little sort of like fandom that goes on, like, oh my gosh, it's you. Like, is that like not cool in the artist community? You're like, oh, it's nice to meet you. Oh, it's nice to meet you. Or do you just get to be like, okay, let's have a small freak out. I can't believe I'm standing in front of this piece, or I'm actually talking to you in person. Like, who do you sort of, fangirl over when it comes to, like, have you ever just kind of gotten a little bit beside yourself, or is that like?
It's interesting. You're just so much in it. I mean, of course, it's an honor to be working with all these different people, but I'm sure, just like yourself, if you get to, you might admire so many different cuisines, so many different chefs,
Totally.
you go to other restaurants. And so, of course, you have lots and lots of different personalities. And some people are very outgoing also in a collaboration. Other people have very set ideas. I mean, it's a universe. I mean, it's the entire world, in terms of people and outlooks and aesthetics. Each experience is completely unique and different.
I think you're more professional than I am. I like meet someone, I'm like, I can't believe I'm meeting you. This is like super exciting. Okay, so talk a little bit about the projects you're working on. You have two going on. One is launching this week or soon. Is it Friday or when
Yes.
does Jenny's stuff go up? It's soon, right? And the other one is in November. Tell us about those projects.
The show that opens on Friday to the public, and I'm just going to say this now and once, because of COVID, please make sure you get your tickets online. You need to have like a reserved time, because we want to make sure it doesn't get crowded and things like that. So the show that's about to open is called City of Tomorrow, Ginny Wright and the Art That Shaped a New Seattle. And just like you, when, the pandemic hit and suddenly we were all at home, we've been more introspective in thinking about the city and our community. And on top of all that, just before the pandemic hit, Ginny Wright, or Virginia is actually her official name, but everybody really knows her as Ginny.
You call her Jenny.
Ginny, I like Ginny too. Ginny passed away in February. She was truly a pillar of kind of forging a whole community around contemporary art here in Seattle. She was in her early 90s when she passed away, and we thought, all right, here we are. This is the moment. Let's take stock of the incredible legacy that she's left us.
Right.
And so the exhibition is a mixture of the incredible collection she put together. I mean, she was a collector. She was a longtime SAM docent, a board member of over 60 years, and trustee. But she started really, really cool things here in the city, including a contemporary art group long before our museum had a modern and contemporary art department.
She's done. So she has this very wide, far afield sort of influence on the Seattle art scene. Can you kind of walk us through a general timeline of, because she really is her name pops up everywhere as we start to understand our own art history here in the city. Walk us through sort of.
I'm going to start with a picture because you want to know who you are.
No, I love this. Yes. Yeah, show us what you got.
All right. So let me see. Let me make sure. I hope everybody can see that.
Absolutely. So she's beautiful. Look at her.
This is Ginny Wright in the maybe mid-1960s. So for the people who don't know her, never heard of her, Ginny is the daughter of the Blodells. Maybe some of you have been to Bainbridge Island. Is the Blodell Reserve. That was her parents. They moved there. Her mother loved gardening, and so her parents later on established the Blodell Reserve. And she grew up in Vancouver and spent kind of summers around Seattle when she was really young. And then she studied in New York at Barnard College. She studied art history, got her bachelor's there. And through a very inspirational teacher, she was introduced to contemporary art. And we have to remember New York at that time, it was like all starting to happen. This was where, you know, big ideas in art were starting to galvanize during and right after World War II. And so she would have been there in the late 40s, early 50s,
okay.
just as all of that was taking off. And so that was just the very beginning. And then she moved back to Seattle with her husband, Bagley, who helped with the financing of the Space Needle, the Seattle icon for the Seattle World's Fair. So I have another fun
little tower across the street there. Yeah, look at this. Oh, I love it.
So City of Tomorrow, sorry, I hope people can read that, was a poster / special edition for the Seattle Times.
So 62 we're talking.
62.
Okay.
In the middle. Sorry about the reverse. This is kind of part in terms of the reading. But since we're doing this paper and we're fun, in the middle is Ginny at the launch or introduction of the Space Needle in 1961, all dressed to the nines and all of that. And then a couple of, it was a very future-focused fair. So check out that car at the bottom.
No, it's
and of
amazing.
course also that monorail that was built. So Life magazine was all over it. And JFK opened it via telephone with like a speech. I mean, it was a moment, as I got to understand, because obviously I'm new to town, but 1962 on the World's Fair, from everybody I spoke to and what I've read, was a turning point in the city because suddenly people were thinking about what might be possible, a different kind of future. And of course, it was the beginning of the space exploration, was just around the corner. And if you go back to the fair and some of those documentations, I love how the region was already sustainable, well ahead of its time. They advertised hydropower and various other future visions of what technology might do in the future. So it was a very, very cool show. And it also showcased contemporary art, some of which were the artists who Ginny Wright had gotten to know in New York City in the early 1950s when she worked at an art gallery there. And that gave her the idea of, gosh, wouldn't it be great to have more great shows, especially of contemporary art, for which there wasn't much of an outlet in Seattle, apart, of course, from the important indigenous art that was well-established, well-known, well-loved here in the region, and, you know, the kind of artists who had made a name earlier in Seattle, kind of what are Mark Tobey, if that's a name that's familiar to anyone, and kind of people from that generation. But she wanted to bring what was considered to be so cool and hip in New York City, and all of those new ideas and developments, and bring them back to
well ahead of her time in that sense. I mean, in so many ways, you know, I even remember when Dad always tells Brian and I the story that when the Space Needle was being built, and they first said there's going to be a restaurant on top of this. I mean, they built the thing like in a year or something. We tour it tomorrow, actually, as a field trip, and so we're gonna be up there. But that our grandfather gave this big speech in the restaurant that just said, "Look, this is the future of dining, and we've got to shape up. Like, we have to like rise to the occasion, because once this thing is built, you know, it's either their way or the highway. Like we were gonna have this competition, and it sort of galvanized the team to say we've got to push the restaurant forward. And I think the World's Fair and the Space Needle and all of that, you know, kind of kicks Seattle into gear in all these little ways. And though I didn't realize that it was also part of the art thing. Yeah.
I love to hear about that. That's really, really interesting. And of course, it's like, it was the first restaurant on top of a tower that had like this rotating mechanism, so you could sit down, and if you didn't get dizzy, you could actually see the whole city and panorama from up there.
It's so we'd love that, but then, you know, for half of dinner you'd be staring at Highway 99. So we just went with the fixed. Do you know, you mentioned Mark Tobey, and it reminds me of a story. So I'm sitting upstairs, you know, in this private dining room we have, and the walls over here, they used to be mirror, but about the same time frame as the story you're telling, Mark Tobey actually came and offered to Peter. He said, "Look, I'll paint you a mural on this wall for if I could just have dinner for life. If we'll just make an arrangement where I'll just paint this wall, and then like for the rest of my life, you know, I won't have to pay here." And very foolishly, Peter said no. And you know, and so we're all sort of like after the fact kicking ourselves, because clearly that would have been way more valuable than obviously the price of dinner. But we have been fortunate.
Oh, what a great story.
Yeah, but you know, you can, hindsight is 20/20. But when we're looking at Jenny Wright and we're saying, you know, the influence and impact that she's had on this city, what about specifically for you had to go through and pull like a few pieces of this whole body of work and stuff? How did you do that? And like, how did you choose? You're telling her story through this exhibition. How do you take the grand volume of body of work and significance and pare it down into what was that process like?
Yeah, it's really, really hard, quite frankly. I mean, you know, Ginny and her husband Bagley over their lifetime gave over 200 major artworks to the Seattle Art Museum alone. And I should also say that they were so civic-minded in helping to foster other institutions around Seattle, like the Repertory Theater was a big project for her husband, for instance, but also the Henry Art Gallery, the university. It's not just limited to our museum, and telling that larger story and imagining what the future looks like was kind of part of that project. But, you know, just to give you a little flavor of the variety of art she collected. So what I tried to do in my selection is give people almost gallery by gallery an introduction to different kinds of art she collected. Okay. So back in the day in New York City, when all of that abstract painting, you know, was like the thing that everybody was looking at. I mean, see if you can see that a little better if I double this up.
Yeah, no, I can see it.
You know, like these really dramatic paintings, and then much more lyrical ones over here. De Kooning was one of the big heroes. And the cool thing with her was she collected all of these artists, for the most part, right out of their first shows. You know, she saw the work, she bought it. A lot of people, I mean, that takes a lot of guts, right?
She had that instinct. She knew, like, that is quality work, and brought it into her own collection, and then from that donates all these pieces to the museum. Yeah.
So I mean, she often said, I mean, there are a couple of others, you know, but also sculptures. Yeah. And I mean, she kind of keeps growing bit by bit, and it's just really hard to convey the scale of some of those things in a single exhibition, but trying to tell that bigger picture. So, you know, going from like abstract paintings to large installations and sculptures. I have another fun picture here. If anyone's ever been up to Western Washington University, oh, sorry, before we go there. Okay. So you just saw this kind of gorgeous gestural painting, right? Now look at that, really cool, very austere almost. This is kind of minimal art.
It's the gray. Will you hold that one up again with a piece of paper behind it? You're saying is the painting on the wall or the sculpture on the left? Okay.
This is a sculpture.
There's something in the MoMA.
And
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This artist just had a huge retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Donald Judd,
I saw it.
his name. And this is a California artist. Really hard to see, especially. I'm laughing. I'm showing you. Talk about the copy of a copy of a copy. You have this gorgeous painting, which you must come and see in person. Yeah. Cool thing about that particular work is they all work with light as a material, so they create surfaces that are reflective. They like that little white painting that I was trying to show you. If you're in the gallery and you walk past it, it flashes because she puts glass particles in the middle of it.
way.
You know, like in the road,
Yeah.
when you have like reflectors,
Yeah.
it's kind of the same
They just light
phenomenon.
up. Yeah.
Suddenly lights up a strip. So completely different aesthetic. And then if you go up to Western Washington University, her father in 1969 established a fund for her that would, with the purpose of acquiring work for public spaces. So a lot of amazing sculptures you see around Seattle, not just at our Olympic Sculpture Park, but at Seattle Center, the big hammering man in front of our building. All of these are things that Ginny helped commission. And if you go up to Western Washington University, she and a group of her advisors created this big sculpture park, and all of these different, they're very large in scale, but it's really fun, especially now in the fall, to go up there. Pretty safe for COVID. It's all outdoors. It's all free. It's a wonderful trip.
And she
and I love this picture of her with the, can you see that? She has like the wrench here. This is the artist. Does these huge, enormous installations. And there she is, kind of holding that big wrench for him as he's tightening up the screws.
So, Katarina, where does she get? I mean, and maybe I'm just gonna sort of like display my ignorance and wide open view. How does take the sculpture, take the column of sort of this austere, very symmetrical column of cubes or whatnot. Take a white painting that's white on white on white with a little reflectivity. How does Ginny, how do you look through, dozens and dozens of those and say, that is special. This one, not so much. Like, what is it that the two of you, in a certain sense, I kind of feel like, you get to be so intimate with her work and the life of sort of, like, how does that happen? What is it that she sees, and what is it that you see in the work that she sees? Does that make sense? Like, I kind of see you like standing on these shoulders of this incredible woman, and now we get to come in and experience it, a microcosm of it. But can you walk us through the curator's eye of what distinguishes just another stark painting on the wall to something truly special?
Yeah, I'd love, thank you so much for that question. It's a really good one. I mean, what comes before acquiring a work or deciding this is important, or, this is something that, a lot of people have done before, comes, a lot of reading, a lot of studying, and a lot of looking. The more you see things, and you can kind of evaluate it against the larger art history, the more you can understand, wow, somebody's really taking an incredible risk. Here's somebody who's really trying to push the boundaries of what's possible. Here is somebody who's doing something that hasn't been done before, or is asking new questions. And that's really at the heart of curatorial work, because what you do in a museum is you essentially explore different stories. And when you lay out an exhibition and you decide every single relationship between this painting and that sculpture and something else, you're trying to draw out a visual narrative. And some of the things that maybe not everybody does, but I certainly do, is you might have 3 different entrances into a single space, or you might see things one way going in and a different way going out. And if you can kind of build on that spatially, you can build complexity within a larger, theme that you're already exploring. So
your part of your role, if I'm hearing you right, is okay. So the art, the piece has been produced, and you're putting yourselves in my shoes, saying, look, this is how you're going to walk through the space. This is how you're going to enter the museum. This is how you can enter the room. This is how you're going to exit the room. As to say, the thing is on the wall, or it's sitting in the center of this volume of space, and you're thinking through the way I'm going to experience that, and kind of building the show that way. I mean, in a certain sense, it makes me think of building a dish. I don't make dishes. Brady Williams, the chef, does the dishes, and yet, those fun moments where he comes forth and he's like, "Hey, I have this new idea, and I've plated it up, and can you eat it? Will you try it?" And I always think of my role. Obviously, it's going to be delicious, right? And so that's never so much the thing as it is thinking through, how will 100 guests perceive this dish? Which orientation will they spin it? Will they pick up a fork or will they pick up a spoon? Like, what is the interaction that the person has with the beautiful thing that's been created, and how can we make that 99 times out of 100 a real special thing? How can I connect the guest? I mean, you said the mission of the art museum is to connect art to life, and I'm thinking, how do I connect the guest to this dish in such a way? And sometimes it takes some massaging, it takes some curation maybe, and I love the of you walking through this space and sort of saying, well, maybe not this here, maybe that here, or maybe after they've seen this one, then they need to go see this one, and there's this sort of journey through.
The way you could also think about it is, you can either have an open menu and everybody chooses whatever they like, or you and the chef plan a menu, right? So you have your appetizer, you have your main dish, you have your dessert, because you know how these different flavors are going to build one onto the other. And, a curator takes you step by step from one gallery into another. And so that too, there is, the order isn't random, but is deliberate.
It's
but
important.
Then, of course, we have choices of taking a left turn and a right turn and deciding, where you want to put your emphasis.
Yes.
So
Yes. And there are so many restaurants that don't give you that choice. Like, this is exactly the way we want you to experience it, which is super cool. And then there are others that kind of sit back and say, I'm going to put you in the driver's seat. And hey, tell me about Barbara Earl Thomas. So here you are.
Yeah. Okay. Just a quick question
before we go there,
out of all of Jenny's work, what was she most excited to see in person?
Did you hear that question?
Yeah, I did hear that question. God. So the best way I can answer that is she always believed in each artist to kind of define the question anew. I don't know about all of her favorites. And gosh, I didn't print this out, but she had a couple of pieces to which she returned over and over again. One was a beautiful Mark Rothko painting. Okay, you got to all come and see the show. There's like no other way to do this. Beautiful color fields that are like clouds moving right in front of you. It's like, and there's a fantastic story around it because she was really attached to it because it was one of the first truly major acquisitions she made. She was barely out of school. She had just started working at this art gallery in Manhattan, in New York. And the gallery next door, which showed super cutting edge artists, had this show. And a friend ran over and told her, you really got to see this painting. It's like fire and ice. And she went to see it and she loved it, but she thought it was huge. I mean, by today's standards, it's maybe the size of a door. That, we've become accustomed to work that is really much bigger than that. Yeah. But back in the day, that was a huge painting. And so she wants to negotiate to pay the painting kind of over a period of time, kind of in installments, which was possible back then. But the story was that the dealer was gave her the cool shoulder because she was a total unknown and said, he just doesn't sell to just anyone. This is at a time when they couldn't even sell any of these artists' work, but talk about a little bit of attitude, right?
Right. So
she said, you got to go and see the artist. He has to interview you. And if he approves, then I can sell you that painting.
No.
Yep. So they hit it off. And the artist had two stipulations. He said, okay, number one, you've got to hang it right now in your apartment. And that was one thing where she was a little worried about. She said, this is really large. I don't know if it's going to fit. And he said, never mind. It fits in any space. It's going to be just fine. And she later on agreed. She said it was phenomenal. It was like an environment that you would walk into. And the second stipulation, which she thought was hilarious, was that he said, you're not allowed to lend it to any museum for a full year. At that point in time, nobody was buying the art. At that point in time, you know, MoMA and the Whitney and all of those big museums in New York or elsewhere had no interest, or you know, were maybe just starting to look at some of these artists. So she was like, that's hilarious, very easy, I can keep that promise. And so that kind of, that was a very important moment for her, because it was very ambitious, and that same ambition and drive then determined where she wanted to go. And so she had a huge library, she kept reading. But in answer to the question, I think the Rothko was probably one of her favorites.
Before we move on to Barbara Thomas. Yeah.
Okay, if I can cheat, can I cheat? I could, if you let me cheat, I share my screen for 1 second.
Sure,
but you have to give me permission, and then I can show you the painting.
Can we give permission? I think we can trust her at this point. Is that going to work from a production standpoint? Can she share her screen? Is that?
We know how to on the Zoom.
We're not Zoom experts around here, but we're learning. We're getting the hang of it. Let me ask you a question while they're figuring that out. Because you've gotten to know her so well. What personally, is there a character trait of Ginny Wright that you just would love to embody, or to, like, something that you admire about her that you know, you wish you had that in you, that spirit, that sort of, what is the thing most that? Yeah,
there's so many things that are inspiring, but I think for me, especially as a curator, I mean, I'm trained to look at art, right? I mean, I can spend the whole day looking at art and I'm not going to get tired or bored or anything. But if you think about it, I mean, take your taste in music, right? When you grow up, you know, maybe it's your teenage years or when you're, you know, a young adult, that music will probably stay with you and will have like a deep connection with you. Are you going to keep up with all the music trends that continue going forward? Ginny, when it came to art, had this amazing curiosity that kept her open-minded, not professionally, but just out of a personal drive. And so to challenge yourself all the time and say, well, it's a little out of my comfort zone, but I'm going to look and really consider at that. And
so would we talk about modern and contemporary, what Ginny was able to do over her lifetime, right out of school, out into New York, to later in her life? I mean, I always wrestle with those words and try to understand the difference between them, but like speaking, you know, belonging to the present is like, you know, what we think about for contemporary, and up to date for modern. So you're saying throughout her lifetime, she didn't just keep listening to the album that she loved in, you know, in her 20s. She kept taking risks and staying with the time. And so her collection has been a scrolling snapshot of what, 30, 40, 50 years of modern and contemporary art, which really kind of sets her in many ways apart from so many of her other collectors and so many of her peers, perhaps, is because she was a risk taker, and she knew, she saw beauty, and she knew, and she went after it, which I think is.
Yeah, but I think you really nailed it. That's exactly.
Those are my notes from you yesterday. So I didn't make that up. Okay, hold on, Barbara. I want to get to her because I think she's so cool. Barbara Earl Thomas. Here you are. You are currently working with her. She is. She's crushed. This woman is. She's a writer. She is a speaker. She's a lecturer about art. She is an artist herself. She is a teacher. She is a commentator, I think, on society through her art and through her words. And I don't know. I see her as this sort of like fearless woman who is just. Tell me about her. Tell me what it's like to work with her. Tell me about the exhibit that you are putting together. This is one of our own hometown heroes who I think we can be so proud in. But take us to the inside of that. What are you working on with this next exhibit?
Okay, first of all, I have to show you a picture of Barbara because we want to know who we're dealing with here. So here's Barbara Earl Thomas with one of her works. Super cute picture of her.
Like it.
And I know she looks like she's age 35, but she's looking back on kind of a long career. She keeps telling me she's somewhere in her 60s, and I don't believe it. I mean, she really is so useful. And God, there's so many things I need to tell you about Barbara. So her parents grew up in the South and moved to the Pacific Northwest. So she's a Northwesterner, but she grew up with the traditions and so many stories and mythologies that connect her back to the South. That's an important part kind of her background. And storytelling in particular is something that she was always drawn to. And kind of the grand stories about life and death. Actually, she lost her parents very tragically in I think it was a boating accident, and she lost them early on. So kind of growing up, here in the region with relatives, much, beloved and everything. But I'm sure that the sense of loss that you carry around with yourself is also something that informs who you are. So she studied at the University of Washington in the 1970s. As you were saying, she's a fabulous writer. She's also someone who has this incredible capacity to make everyone feel completely comfortable.
Yes.
So if you're talking about really difficult issues, like the country is right now,
like a dozen issues right now that we could dive into, sure.
Yep. But as she puts it, the issues around race and the color line that have a very long and very complicated history in this country, and the repercussions of all of that in everyday life. I mean, this has been the year where all of this has come to a boiling point. These are thoughts she's been thinking about for a very long time, but oftentimes, I have one more fun picture to show you before I can share with you what she's now making. So she studied printmaking and painting at the University of Washington, studied with Jacob Lawrence, famous artist, amongst others. So, yeah, it's a bit hard to see.
No, we can see it. We can see it. It's cool.
So this piece is called In Case of Flood. So there are sometimes really biblical implications, it's like there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
But the kind of imagery can become a metaphor for thinking about, all of these big questions that we have to wrestle with. And so going back to the question of what is it like to work with an artist? So I met Barbara maybe in 2013, a couple of years after I moved here to Seattle. And, and so I've done a number of studio visits with her over the years. Actually, one of the really fun things you get to do as a curator of contemporary art, you want to see what artists are working on. So when I go traveling, when I'm here in town, it's wonderful to ask artists if they would invite you to their studio and share their thoughts and ideas. So we've had a longer conversation already. And when we asked if she would do an exhibition with us at the Seattle Art Museum, she decided she was going to make all new work for the show. But there's one kind of hanging structure that's pre-existing, but otherwise it's all new work. And instead of the more complex visual imagery she had done before, she was really paring it down. And what she decided to do for this exhibition is she singled out portraits, a lot of them of friends and family. So kind of she builds a sense of community, but of very young Black boys and girls. Sure. And I have to show you some. Let's see which ones are cool. And they oopsies. There's a little storage here. They almost look, if you can see that, as if they were illuminated from behind. You see like that yellow and orange and red and a little blue behind it.
Yeah, jumping off the black.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to explain because it's not a print, but she cuts paper and puts different colors behind it to give it almost the appearance of an illumination. It's something that happened after she did a glass residency. And so I just showed you this very spare one, which was actually inspired by a photograph it was inspired by a just photograph she saw in the media of a couple of young black kids at a demonstration, and one of them held the sign "Don't shoot," very much to our moment, of course.
Yes.
And but rather than dwell on everything that's really so traumatic for everybody, especially people in the black community, but really it concerns the entire country and everyone. She wanted to focus on the much larger issue of, what do I want to see? So she replaced the sign, "Don't shoot," with "Grace." That was the one I just showed you. And really what she's trying to do is, I'm going to show you one more of those portraits. You can see how a lot more color then entered those portraits. Here's another really gorgeous one.
Cut paper.
That she made.
Awesome. Yeah.
It's all paper, but it's layers of paper, right? And
so you're saying, Katarina, you're saying when the museum said, "Hey, let's do this exhibit," she's like, I'm gonna do all new work for this. And I guess what strikes me about this is that here's this woman who has such a powerful voice, and instead of taking from a huge body of artwork that she has already got, she's basically inviting us into the conversation of the day through her artwork. And I love this a picture because I feel like these are hard topics to talk about. They're not easily understood. And there's something, it's like the same thing as song. Like, you can discuss something, you could sing something, you could eat something, you could experience something. And here I think she is doing this remarkable job of inviting us into the complexity and the difficulties of the issues and forcing us to consider in this way topics that we need to consider. How in the world do you intersect with that? This is literally a dialogue that you guys are having. I mean, is that when we're curating, we're not just like you said earlier, we're not choosing paintings from Rembrandt from a bunch of years ago. You're literally having this conversation with her. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And yeah, so it unfolds. And also, I mean, it's important to remember Barbara arrived at this work not because of everything that happened this year. She started this work a year ago in 2019. And it's more that she was really trying to draw on the fullness of her experience as a thinker, as a writer, as a visual artist, to put us, regardless of our race and generationally or class, in front of these young faces.
Yeah.
And their expressions are so disarming and trustful. And the title of her exhibition is "The Geography of Innocence," gives you already a sense of where she's going, because, the idea of how we look at one another is at the heart of what she's doing. And in a very material way, the way we perceive light and dark, right? I mean, going back to stories in the Bible, the light of God and darkness is being construed as something
ancient
negative.
Themes that are woven deep into us culturally, like what we're
right.
And since she's doing it a la minute, to use a restaurant term, it's got to be risky for her. In the sense, I mean, earlier you said one of the things that Jenny was so good was understanding those that took risk, or the thing that hallmarks or distinguishes a special piece is that you see the artist on this edge, And so this has got to be a leap for her, I would imagine, to sort of have the pressure of Seattle Art Museum be like, cool, we're going to put you in here. And she's like, cool, I'm going to create for this, like, right now. And I want to come, like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I guess what I'm feeling from her is the bravery and the audacity to be that risky, maybe, that bold. I dig it.
I really agree. And also, you know, paper and printmaking and paper is something that she has a long history with, but glass is relatively new for her. So what I showed you right now, some of those portraits are these beautiful cut paper portraits that really look as if they're glowing from within.
Yeah.
And then she's creating, and this is really new, and talk about risk taking, she's creating several glass portraits that are also illuminated from behind. That's a whole new process. In fact, she is still working on 2 more. Everybody, please keep your fingers crossed because it's been complicated. One of them broke, and you know she's.
And this thing goes live in November, right? So yeah, no pressure here, Barbara. But yeah, this is like real life. Like glass breaks. Okay, hold on a second. But we have a zillion questions coming in, and like.
Okay.
And like in less than 10 minutes to cover them. Before we jump to, we'll do like a rapid fire question and answer. But I'm fighting for time with the crew over here. But before we do, I want to ask my one question, and then you can ask yours. The one character trait from Barbara that you just I don't know, that just distinguishes her. The thing, your favorite thing about her.
My favorite thing about Barbara is sitting down and talking with her. I think I mentioned to you yesterday, I feel it's been such an incredible gift this year as we've been in the pandemic, as we've been watching the horrors of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, to be able to work on this exhibition with Barbara, who is such a close listener, who always strives to bring people together. You know, there's so much anger in society right now, and she's aiming high. She's like, we're all human, essentially. You know, can we just be present to the fact that we're looking at these young children? Can you see them as children full of aspirations, of hopes? Can you be invested in their futures, regardless of who you are? And just before we go to those other questions, so she's creating a whole, there's going to be like 2 related galleries. One of them is plays only with light and shadow. So you as the viewer is going to be in the shadow and the portraits are going to be in the light. I think it's going to be quite astounding.
Cool. On the forefront of some of the most important work we could do as a country right now is Barbara Earl Thomas. And let me just say it super directly. If you're watching this thing and you haven't figured out, you need to go online, buy a ticket, and go to see this thing. Do yourself a favor. Can we jump into, we're going to do like a rapid fire question answer as these things are sort of stacking up.
Rapid fire.
Hit me. What do you got?
Who is the most influential contemporary artist that came out of the Pacific Northwest?
Most influential contemporary artist out of the Pacific Northwest.
Oh my God. I mean,
man, this is rapid fire? First one that comes to your mind.
A couple favorites.
A couple of people. Okay, Gary Hill, anyone? One of the big pioneers of video art. Incredibly important. If you don't know him, look him up.
Gary Hill.
I had a show at the Henry Art Gallery not long ago. Very important. Of course, Barbara Earl Thomas, I have to mention her. Gosh, I mean, there are so, I mean, if you look back historically, we mentioned Mark Tobey and that whole group of people. There are, it's impossible to ask an artist.
Okay, that's fine.
You know,
that's great.
Which of your favorite children is your favorite? Next question.
Next question.
Next
How does she discover art? Does she have favorite museums in the world? How does she?
Got it. You have a PhD in art history, but how do you, so you're studied? But where do you go to find new art? What is cutting edge for you? Where are your go-to spots? Like, take us on that list.
God, okay, travel. Wherever you go, there is something to discover. I mean, start with the galleries right here in Seattle. and take a look and see what artists are doing here. Of course, I go to big biennales, I go to art galleries. Usually I travel at least twice a year to New York or to Los Angeles, you know, two big hubs. I love going to Vancouver, BC. I'm originally from Germany, so I travel once a year, you know, to Europe to visit my relatives. I'll go and look at what, you know, what's in big museums. That's in person. And I always recommend seeing art in person. But on top of that, of course, you read, you look at big magazines and online resources. If anyone listening,
what's the one magazine I signed up for? If I want to just come out of my art dark hole that I live in, give me one subscription.
All right, look at Art Forum. You know, also online, it's free. You can look up. They cover the news. They cover, you know, upcoming shows all over the world. They let, you know, they have their critics' picks, and they have great articles and videos too. So Art Forum is a good one to start with.
Brian,
any up-and-coming artists worth investing in?
By investing, do you mean
like
buy their art?
Purchasing original piece of art.
Okay, purchasing original piece. Okay, you know this is such a personal thing. It's like any wines that you should throw in your cellar. Okay, up and coming artist that you heard it here first.
Yeah, like
you know,
what would she be buying today?
That you would buy you would buy this and put it in your own for 1 year at least right away. What would you buy right now if you could?
Oh my God, there's so many people I want to buy right now, but you know, because I work for a non-commercial place, I'm not allowed to say this is the person you should buy and invest in.
Just kidding about that question. Okay, we can't say that.
Strike it from the record.
But if you're really serious, just reach out to me, and I'm happy to have conversations with people always. I mean,
excellent.
In fact, I'm not the only curator here at the museum with an interest in contemporary art, I should say. You know, we have experts in Asian art who do contemporary art. We have experts in African art, for instance. I mean, it's a whole massive world out there, and it depends more on what are you interested in. And, you know, you could focus only on buying work by women artists. You could focus only on buying work by African-American artists. You could want to take a global perspective. And in each instance, there are amazing artists you could look at. Do
you know what I want to do? Maybe this is like a creative, you know, pandemic for you, a pivot. I really want to go art shopping with you. Because I feel like I got to go wine tasting. Every wine I drink, I'm like, oh, it's delicious. Buy a case. And then later it's like, you're like, why did I buy this wine, right? So, like, I think maybe, like, you guys could just be, like, art guides. You know how those people take you through Nordstrom and help you pick out socks and stuff? Like, I want to go art shopping with you. But, like, I'm thinking about buying a piece. I'm like, what do you think? Do you love it? And you're like, I don't really know. Okay, we got one fast question.
Let's do it.
Oh, wait, no. Are you saying we're out of time?
A little bit. We got to turn the set for KXP.
We got another show. We're doing KXP. I got a quick question for you. Maurizio Catalan, duct tape banana.
Oh,
modern art or not? Just, is it, I mean, are we there? Is it art? Can you just help me out with the duct tape banana? I don't know what to think.
All right, I have a fun story as an answer. I was at the fair when that piece went up, although I actually didn't get to see it at the fair. I get a text message from my husband. Not of the banana with the duct tape, but the one he made at home in our kitchen. He's like, oh, I just made a multi-million-dollar artwork for you.
Right?
So it's very ironic, and I personally think that was a bit of a one-liner, you know, but somebody bought it for a lot of money.
Fair enough. I will take that as maybe not to pursue buying my own banana, especially because they brown so quickly. I want to say thank you to you, Katarina. I think you're so cool. I wish we could do this for several hours. I know we covered two artists in a world that is just like so massive. But thank you for taking us inside a little bit into your world, into the museum's world, into these two women who our city can proudly stand on their shoulders and celebrate, and I appreciate you opening my eyes to that. So I look forward to seeing again. Go to the Seattle Art Museum, buy the things online, buy a ticket online, go check it out. They've got a COVID-safe way to do that, and I just want to say thank you for being our adjunct Canlis Community College professor today. You were awesome. It's been awesome.
Oh, it's been so much fun. Thank you for the invitation. You should definitely come to the museum, and we can have a personal spin through the galleries.
Sold.
And everybody else too. I mean, if anyone is listening who's like, God, I really would like to learn more about this stuff. I mean, really dig deeper. You know, there are many different ways you can get involved, and yeah, reach out to me or to membership or something else, because we do a lot of cool things behind the scene that that people might not know about. Yeah.
Cool. Well, for those watching, we'll put Katarina's favorite stuff on the class notes afterwards. The magazines, the art museums, all her favorite things. We'll put that on the class notes. Feel free to download those. But Katarina, what a pleasure to be with you this evening.
So much fun. Thank you. And I look forward to coming back to the restaurant.
Sounds good. Take care.
Except for that pandemic.
All right,
Thank
stay
you.
tuned. We're about to launch KEXP with my brother in just about 45 short minutes. We'll be right back.
Sure.